everybody, welcome back to Dave's Garage 249. I'm Dave. So the last video we talked about the power steering pump and the big ordeal of that, and really that may not be over with yet. I'll get back to that later. Anyways, we went back to the transmission pan. I said, hey, the transmission pan leaks pretty severely on this thing, or there's a transmission leak, and I put a pan underneath this transmission and a big piece of newspaper, and most of it was coming from the front of the pan, and it was coming from, this is the front here, and it was coming from a couple of bolts. They were, a couple of the bolts had fluid all over them. So I removed the pan, and when I broke everything loose, my 20 volt was stalling on those two bolts in particular. It stalled out a 20 volt drill. A couple others did too. So torquing was an issue, and probably previous owner or somebody tightened those up trying to stop the leak. That pan gaskets, you don't really have to, you're not supposed to torque them up very tight, and there's a torquing sequence that you're supposed to follow too. So anyways, so then the next thing is that what pan gasket do I get? I'm not familiar with the Chrysler transmission, so I was kind of perplexed as to the shape because it didn't really register with the 727 torque flight, which is what I assumed the transmission was. But I reached out to my friend Jim, who he's real familiar with all these, and he said, Dave, that's a 1962 through 65 904 transmission. So okay, so now I know what gasket to order. And he said, interesting, that he thought that this looked like a valve body from a 747 transmission, and the servos, which that's starting to get a little bit more technical, but this is the valve body here, and this is what controls most of your shifting. It's old school programming. This is a filter, and this is the where the fluid gets picked up from inside the pan. This is the suction point right here on the transmission. Interesting. And this also has a deep pan. Well, if you have a deep pan, to take advantage of it, this should have an extension on it, and it's not extended. So it doesn't really do you a lot of good to put a deep pan on, other than you're carrying an extra few quarts of fluid around with you for some reason, but you're not really, you should have this pickup stuck down in there so it uses it. So the major portion of the leak, I'm pretty sure, is going to be stopped up by getting a proper pan gasket and getting it installed and torqued down properly. There may be some that I'll see from this governor gizwop back here. It every now and then it formulates a drip, but on the newspaper I wasn't seeing anything. So now we know though that this is a 904 transmission. And this transmission is a little bit unique because from what I've been told is that they were common for 318s, and they were common on the slant 6s with automatics, but they have a special bolt pattern for 383s. This is just what I've been told. If you know better than that, chime in, but this is information I'm getting from people that have been around for a long time and know these things. So that's interesting that I thought that this transmission might have been from the 318 that came in the car, and they just swapped the 383 out. But this still may not be the transmission that came in the car. So learned a few things. Usually when they do this valve body upgrade and servo upgrade, it's an inexpensive way to upgrade the transmission and make it perform a little bit better. That's my understanding. Okay, so coming over here where I have the drain pan, you can see this is a deep pan, aftermarket, and I think the lighting is good enough that you can kind of see the pattern of where the gasket was. When I laid over the new gasket, you can see that what happened was, I think that the pan gasket shifted when it was bolted on, and it got real close to these holes. And these holes, you could put a 3/8 bolt through these, and they're 5/16. Actually, I think, no, they're 1/4 and these would be 5/16. Anyways, so you have a large hole and a smaller screw. So if the gasket isn't centered up, you can get the gasket close to the edge or from one side to the other, and you will get leakage. And I think that's what was happening. And what he did was tried to torque these up, or somebody tried to torque these up and over tighten them.
So we have to put this on a surface plate and check and make sure that they didn't dimple these holes the wrong way and make sure everything's flat. Also, you can see here's from the stamping a little excess material and it's wavy. Now it did not look like it was leaking over here, but I'm going to check this and see if I can maybe just flatten this out just a little bit better just to ensure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick the gasket on like you would a rocker cover to the pan gasket before I install it, and then I'm going to put some sealant on the bolts when I reinstall it and try to just minimize the ability to leak. If you remove it, it's just a little bit more mess to clean up, but beats the heck out of leaky transmission pan. Also inside was this magnet, and it was stuck to this detent here in this area here, which neat that it had a magnet in it, but it did not have a drain. So my friend Scott, he took it over to him and he put a drain plug in it for me. Now if it hangs down a little too low, now this car will not be, I will not have this car lowered that I can think of, but anyways, we could always just chuck that up in a lathe and cut that head of that bolt down a little bit if it looks like it's going to be a problem. I don't think it's going to be. And I'm going to epoxy this magnet in the pan, probably over here, because first of all, I want the pan to drain completely, and secondly, some people will say, well, you want it, you don't want the sludge to drain out. Why wouldn't you? I don't know. Have it sticking up a little bit. But incidentally, when I drained the pan and got it off there was very little. There was no metal in this whatsoever, and there was just a little bit of sludge and clutch material in here, but not bad. So I'm not concerned at all about the health of this transmission. I just needed to know what it was more than anything. So now we know we don't have a Torque Flight 727. We've got a 904, which just has smaller clutches and smaller bands than a Torque Flight 727. So just not a good transmission for high horsepower applications, but just fine for this fairly stock 383.
So let's flip this pan over and put the gasket underneath and see how the bolt holes lined up. So this would have been the bolt hole here and here that were leaking because the gaskets weren't lined up. So let's go around and see how things line up. Oh, look at there. Look at there. Look at there. Look at there. I don't know, the lighting isn't good enough to see that one. Let's shove it over. Not good. Okay. 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 Okay, so this is the best I could get it to line up. I messed with this thing for 5 minutes. And no matter what you do, you're going to wind up with a couple of these not lined up very well. Look at that. That is going to leak. That is going to leak. So that one's going to leak. So if you move it and center these ones, get them centered up, you're going to misalign others. So to me what that means is that this fine piece of tin here is really crap, but it's $309 for a nice aluminum finned one. I'm not going to do that, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put sealant on these bolts on the washer, just goop the sealant all over everything. Another way to go would be to buy a great big piece of gasket material and completely make a gasket that would fit this correctly. That's going to take a lot of time. But I just wanted to show you that it's getting to be more and more stuff that you buy that's made in China is just pretty dang sketchy. So before applying sealant to the surface of this pan, also gives you an indication of if there's been any dimpling of the holes from
bolts being over torqued, just take a flat block, and I used some 180 grit paper, and just crosshatch, scuff up the surface a little bit to give the sealant some teeth to bite into. This powder coating, it's pretty smooth, so it just gives some teeth for the sealant to bite into a little bit and help promote a good seal. So we got the sealant kind of smeared around with the finger, nice and even coat all the way around all the bolt holes. So now we'll get the gasket lined up and stuck on there. So the gasket's on there, and let it tack up for a couple minutes, and I'm going to go apply some sealant to the first few bolts and get the thing under the car and get those first few bolts started in and get it up under the car. So in case we have any issues with the gasket and hole alignment and any shifting, then I've taken the precaution of putting some sealant on the threads and a little bit on the washer there to kind of just fill any gaps, or if the gasket gets close to the edge. And it feels pretty good. All the threads are going in, all the bolts are going in pretty easy, so I don't think I'm really rubbing it up against the gasket. And being that I stuck the gasket onto the pan with a sealant, it didn't feel like it shifted any. So, but this is just another precaution. Hey everybody, so we put the transmission pan back on, sealed the gasket, sealed the bolts, and as I was in the process of torquing up all the bolts, one of them got almost to 12 inch-pounds, and then it broke loose and spun around. So that meant that the threads were pulled, probably damaged before. And there's another bolt that I'm not happy with the way that one felt. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and put this transmission back together, and I need to get it up on a hoist and do a helicoil repair. And once a couple of helicoil repairs are done, this pan gasket won't leak anymore. But that's what we wanted to find out. It's a process. Somebody over torqued a bunch of those screws, which dimpled the pan, and the pan gasket wasn't aligned properly. So put it on, put it down with some sealant so it'd stay aligned, and torqued it all up, and unfortunately some of the threads just gave out. That's aluminum housing, so I'll just do a helicoil repair and that'll be good to go. But this is the process of finding out what damage has been done in the past to the car. And so we'll move on to front wheels and tires.